You're about to see one of the most outrageous shots that's ever been hit in the history of tennis. Given the stakes and the setting, this shot should have never been attempted. And yet... So what you're watching here is a match between two men. The current world #1 ranked player and an up-and-comer who's trying to get the first big win of his career. One of these men is playing with the confidence that can seemingly only come from years of experience playing on the biggest stages, and the other is clawing desperately to win a point. However, the body language and the status of these players don't add up. See, this is Rafael Nadal, one of tennis's big three players and the current #1 rank. And in this match, he's on the back foot. And this is Nick Kyrgios, a currently unranked player from Australia who is surgically, almost too calmly winning this match. And this isn't some low-stakes exhibition. This is win or go home at Wimbledon. But how did we get here? How were these two athletes brought to this stage that is now both unexpected and unbelievable, and what's going to become of this match? Let's find out.
Outrageous! Merciless from Nick Kyrgios. No chance for Nadal.
The first thing that you likely recognize here is the iconic grass of Wimbledon, as the only one of tennis's 4 Grand Slam tournaments to be played on that surface. Grass courts are a central part of the history of tennis as the oldest of the court surfaces, but they've fallen out of popularity in favor of the much easier to maintain acrylic court like you see at the US Open. But Wimbledon, a tournament that is drenched in tradition, where players have to wear all white due to a dress code that dates back to Victorian England, and spectators dine on strawberries and cream, a dish that dates back to the Tudor era in Britain, has maintained its commitment to the grass court. It's a privilege to even get to play at Wimbledon, as one of tennis's most prestigious tournaments, alongside the Australian, French, and US Opens. There are 3 ways to qualify to play at Wimbledon. Be one of the top-ranked players globally, with a high enough rank on the ATP that you are invited to play just based on merit alone. Be invited as a wild card personally by the Wimbledon team, or do well enough in the qualifying tournament against 128 other hopefuls. These two men got here in very different ways. Rafael Nadal simply had to sign up. In the past 2 years, the Spaniard has won 89% of his matches, giving him an astonishing record of 116 wins and 14 losses. He took home 3 of the Grand Slams he entered in this period and made the finals in another. Throughout his career, he has won 14 Grand Slam tournaments, has established himself as one of the big 3 alongside Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic, and is the current #1 ranked men's player. On the other side of the court is Australian Nick Kyrgios. He is not ranked in the top 10 of the world, or the top 50, or even the top 100. Kyrgios is currently the number 144 ranked player, and he did not qualify to Wimbledon simply by signing up. Instead, he was selected by the tournament committee due to his exciting playstyle that would be sure to impress even the most uptight of fans in attendance. So he is exciting, but to this date, he hasn't been wildly successful. In his professional career so far, Kyrgios has not made it past the second round of a Grand Slam in 4 attempts, but that's not to say he's a nobody. He's a former junior #1 player, and hardcore tennis fans are definitely aware of him as a player with great potential. I mean, he's 19 and he's already at Wimbledon. But putting him up against Rafael Nadal, a true titan of the sport, it's clear that Kyrgios should stand no chance. But things are looking up for the teenager. Rafa and Nick are facing off in the 4th round of Wimbledon, which means that Nick has already won 3 rounds in this tournament to get here, more than doubling his career Grand Slam win count. In the second round, against the 13th seed of the tournament, Nick dropped the first 2 sets and had to save 9 different match points to get the win. And Nadal at this year's Wimbledon hasn't been completely dominant, but he has been consistent, winning his first 3 rounds in 4 sets each, meaning he dropped 1 set a match. Grass isn't Rafa's surface of choice. Grass makes the tennis ball bounce much lower and much faster than it does on hard court, or especially on the slowest surface or Rafa's surface of choice, the clay court. Nadal thrives on clay, as his topspin heavy and athletically dominant game is perfectly suited for the long rallies that are generated by the slower surface. And on the other hand, the quicker grass favors serve and volley players, who serve big and go win points at the net.
Oh, incredible reactions.
But it's not like Rafa can't win on grass. He's won Wimbledon twice, including a 5-set thriller in the finals against Roger Federer in 2008. But let's focus back on the match at hand. This showdown between the two men is going to take place at Wimbledon's greatest stage, Centre Court. A century-old, beautifully manicured grass court surrounded by flowers and even a private box for the royal family to sit in. Wimbledon Centre Court is likely the most famous court in all of tennis. So as the men entered the arena, it was a tenured, dominant player at the very top of the sport against a teenager from Australia who has likely never played in front of this many people, much less this level of stakes and this elevated of a setting. As pundits prepared for the match, the storyline was that Kyrgios had a lot of potential and would maybe one day become a top player, and hopefully we'd get to see some flashes of brilliance in this match as Nadal, of course, took over, dominated, and dispatched the young teenager. That was what we expected to see. And as the match began, immediately the tempo swung sharply one way, but it was not in the way that everyone expected. Kyrgios began the game on serve and ripped an ace past Nadal, who was left flat-footed. Then another ace, and another. Then the first game went to the teenager, with Rafa not scoring a single point. Nadal might have been stunned by the serves, but he wasn't going to let it faze him, and he responded with a held game on his own. But as Nick stepped up again to serve, he notched more aces. He kept dominating. Through his fourth serving game, he had only let Nadal win a single point when he was serving, and that was a double fault. Every serve that Kyrgios had put in bounds resulted in a winning point. But it wasn't just serving. Kyrgios was also showing his aptitude and strength at the baseline, hitting a few strong return winners and rallying with Nadal. He didn't look intimidated or nervous. Instead, with the game count at 5-5, it somehow looked like Kyrgios was continuing to heat up as he won a rally with this epic cross-court winner, then immediately aced twice to again hold with Nadal stuck at love. But critically, Nadal was also holding his serve game after game. He was given a scare in the final game of the set, when he was serving and Kyrgios raced to a 30-love lead. Nadal showed his composure, bringing it to deuce, but then Kyrgios responded with this insane shot. As Jacob Steinberg for The Guardian described, "I'm sitting here in wide-eyed astonishment, my jaw on the ground at some of the shots that Kyrgios is playing." But again, showing his experience, Rafa was able to save the break points and win the game. And so, with both men holding for 6 games in a row, we go to a tiebreak. In tennis, a set-deciding tiebreak occurs if the game count is tied at 6 apiece. The players take turns serving until one of them gets to 7 points, win by 2, in the tiebreak. They are a common enough occurrence in tennis, and they're even more common on grass, a surface that favors a serve and volley player over a more defensive, rally-based playstyle means that players are more likely to hold their serve, and therefore, they're more likely to need a tiebreak to be the decider. The tennis tiebreak is as pure of a sporting competition as they come. It gets rid of the kind of awkward tennis scoring. You're not saying things like 15-40 anymore. You're just scoring 1 point at a time until one person gets to 7. So in this Wimbledon 4th round tiebreak, Kyrgios jumped to a big lead, hitting a winner and outlasting Nadal in a long rally. But a 4-0 lead won't last long against prime Nadal, as he fought back to make it 3-4. The Aussie would win the next 2 points, forcing Nadal around the court before hitting a brilliant winner and then, of course, acing him. Nadal was able to fight back to make it a close tiebreak, putting the score at 6-5, but then Kyrgios got the ball. 1 point away from getting to 7 and ending the set, which he promptly did. with an ace. Suddenly and shockingly, the 19-year-old Nick Kyrgios had just taken a set off the top-ranked player in the world, winning an astonishing 100% of his first serve points compared to Rafa's 71%. Reporters watching the match were at this point impressed with Kyrgios, but they didn't expect him to get any farther. The thought was, as Nadal sees more of his serves, he's going to adapt and win the next 3 games and move on to the quarterfinals. He can't keep this up for 3, 4, 5 sets, surely. He'll have to tire in another half an hour. Kyrgios might not win this match. I doubt he will, but he is going to be some player. It's not a debate. And that was, in the moment, a fair take to have. This was a still unproven teenager who just posted a surely unsustainable ace rate of almost 40%, a rate that rivals some of the best serving sets in tennis history. And Nadal was still the guy who we had seen figure out opponents and clutch out so many wins over the years. The great sports writer Brian Phillips described what happens when Rafael Nadal falls behind. He turns the match into life and death. He gets mad, he hesitates less, he hits the ball harder. He doesn't look sad or scared, he looks defiant, and he plays like he's possessed. So this match had transformed into a battle between a real threat and basically the Incredible Hulk of tennis. Center Court began to fill with spectators as the story of the first set spread throughout the Wimbledon grounds. And so, set 2 began. As it progressed, it remained neck and neck, with each man continuing to hit great shots and better serves.
A return.
And as they did, both men continued to consistently hold their serving games. But if you're Nadal, this is not the dynamic that you want. Kyrgios, as the stronger and taller and more dangerous server, held inevitability. Jacob Steinberg remarked that I've lost count of the amount of aces that Kyrgios has hit already. The most notable game of the set came with Nadal at 3 games to Kyrgios' 2. It was a full-on scrap. Both men were fighting for each point, with rallies going longer and winners needing to be better hit.
What a rally.
Nadal pushed the game to deuce, threatening to get a break, but Kyrgios showed comfort that belied his age and level of Grand Slam experience. He kept controlling the pace with his serve and playing relaxed, while Rafa was left for the scraps. And suddenly, we're back to where we started. Rafa serving to take the game lead, Kyrgios down a few points, but mentally more here than ever. Rafa serves. Nick returns with a backhand that sets his opponent up nicely for a ripping forehand that's aimed straight at Kyrgios. It's no matter though. The shot of the tournament, and maybe of the year. With this body language, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Nadal was the new guy on the scene who was fighting for his first big win. But ever the professional, he took the game on the next point to get a hold. We continue to hurtle through games at a breakneck pace, with Kyrgios notching more aces and Nadal clawing out more rallies despite great shots from the Aussie. Then it was Kyrgios to serve, with 5 games to his name against Nadal's 6. This was to be the second real test for Nick in this match. He had to hold again against perhaps the most clutch player in tennis just to force another tiebreak. We joined the action with Kyrgios in a 15-30 deficit. He serves. It's strong and Nadal's return isn't perfect. Now it's tied at 30-30. Rafa won the next rally down the baseline to give himself another break and set point. So up against this, as Kyrgios prepared to serve, if he knew the pressure he was facing, he didn't show it and promptly aced the Spaniard, making it deuce. Kyrgios turned the screw a little bit farther, taking advantage after forcing a Nadal slice into the net. So now just 1 point away from pushing it to a tiebreak, Nadal had to lunge for a return. It looped nicely towards Nick. Hit the winner here and you go to a tiebreak, which you've already proved that you can win. Mishit it just a little bit, and you're giving prime Nadal another chance to win the rally.
What a rally.
That's a massive turning point. Maybe Rafael Nadal really is inevitable. He pushes to earn advantage. At this point, you can see Rafa gaining momentum with each stroke, inching forward on the court before Kyrgios finally breaks and Rafa lets out a well-earned fist pump as Kyrgios hits net. Giving away the first break game of the entire match, and in doing so, the second set. Tennis is a sport where it's especially hard to make an upset. Because you play so many points over the course of a game, a set, and a match, it's consistency that's often the recipe to win. And especially during this era of tennis, the big three of Federer, Djokovic, and Rafael Nadal were by far the most consistent players in the sport. So surely for Kyrgios, losing that game was backbreaking. The teenager had gotten so close to pushing it to another tiebreak and wasn't able to finish the job, with Nadal snatching the game out from under him. But somehow, Kyrgios didn't seem fazed. In the third set, just as it was in the second before, Nadal had the more advantageous serving position. He was serving first in games, and that meant that he was serving to take the lead. This means that as the two men alternate serving games, and because they're holding so often, winning games, Kyrgios found himself needing to serve to stay in it. Rafa would take a one-game lead when he held his serve, and Nick would need to win his to match it. This is what's called scoreboard pressure. But still, Nick remained. The pundits were correct that Rafa would stop being aced by all of Nick's first serves, as he began getting aced by Nick's second serves. As Steinberg quipped, Kyrgios is an ace machine. This, in combination with his excellence at the baseline, kept earning him serving games without much effort. Even when Rafa would get a serve receive and push it to a rally, Kyrgios just kept his calm, placed his shot, and won the point. He was again brought to deuce in the final game of the set, in a near mirror of the final game of the second set. A monster forehand after a big rally took Rafa again within 1 point of snatching the set from under Nick's nose. But this time the outcome would be different. Facing break and set point, Kyrgios won 3 points in a row, including a fiery ace down the middle to push it to a tiebreak. This can only be described as clutch. And clutch is a hard thing to be when you are 19 years old and facing the top player in all of tennis. So we begin the crucial third set tiebreak. At this point, both men largely know what to expect from one another. There are no more surprises, and so it's going to be about simply who plays better tennis. Rafa painted the line with a perfect forehand. Kyrgios aced him down the tee. An intense rally ended with a Kyrgios backhand winner that took his grunt into a victory scream. And Nadal responded by setting up and converting an overhead smash. The tiebreak was tied at 5-5. First to 7 wins it and takes the set lead, and Kyrgios was up to serve. He won a rally after deftly hitting around the court before Nadal sent a shot long. 6-5 in Kyrgios' favor, but this time he's receiving. It's quiet in center court. Nadal's second serve isn't great, and Kyrgios attacks. Game and set. The fans, with Spain's flag painted on their face, cannot believe their eyes, and the few yellow-shirted Aussie fans in attendance were on their feet. It's worth noting at this point that Rafael Nadal is one of the best tiebreak players in the entire sport. An analysis done by Tennis Abstract found that Nadal was winning tiebreaks 23% more than expected, making him a top 5 tiebreak player in men's tennis. Additionally, he's winning them despite his game and playstyle not really being a natural fit to win tiebreaks, as compared to someone like John Isner, who, due to his utterly dominant serve, has a skill set that is best fit for the tiebreak format. Rafa simply overperforms under pressure. And yet, Nick Kyrgios just won 2 tiebreaks in a row against Rafael Nadal to take a 2-1 set lead. Now in the fourth set of the match, Kyrgios is going to be serving first, so he can apply scoreboard pressure. And apply it he does, taking 3 aces in the first game of the set, and then adding 2 more in the second, with Nadal only scoring a single time. Then comes the most pivotal game of the match. Nadal is serving to tie it up, with the game count at 1-2. The first 2 rallies of the game are great shows of hitting and athleticism, and the score ties up at 15 apiece. Kyrgios takes the lead with a forehand down the line.
He got in the point, allowed him that opportunity, ripped that forehand.
Before Nadal pressures him enough to tie it back up at 30-all. A long rally sees Rafa make it game point. But Kyrgios brings it to deuce.
That was the perfect shot there to pull that out wide.
Another powerful backhand earned him the advantage and the break point. Can he convert? The first break of the entire match for the Australian. He celebrates like he won the match, and in some ways, he kinda did. He was next up to serve, and he continued to hold. He did lose a long rally where he was pushing Nadal all around the court, but the Spaniard just kept returning, just kept staying in it until Kyrgios netted a backhand. But this barely slowed him down, taking home the game right after with a cross-court forehand. And just like that, he had a 4-1 lead in the set. The 2 men again traded hold games to push the game count to 5-2 in Kyrgios' favor.
Doesn't seem to matter.
Nadal was now serving to stay in Wimbledon. And he's the #1 player for a reason. He's not going down without a fight, taking 4 straight points to make it 3-5. But now, the teenager who has been so dominant on serve had the ball in his hands. The thousands in attendance at the historic center court and the hundreds of thousands who were watching it worldwide turned their attention as the 19-year-old Australian began to serve. (15-love). 30-love. Just like he had throughout his service games in the match, Kyrgios seemed to be heating up as he went.
Merciless from Nick Kyrgios. He brings it 3.
The yellow-shirted fans stood up in celebration. They knew how this was going to end, and you probably do too. Let's just watch. With that ace, Kyrgios launched himself into the spotlight of the tennis world. From ranked outside the top 100 and losing in the first round of much smaller tournaments, to beating the top-ranked player in the world at Wimbledon. And he did it at just 19 years old. The last time that a teenager beat the #1 seed at a Grand Slam was in 2005, when the great Roger Federer was toppled by a young Spanish 19-year-old named Rafael Nadal. It's not like Rafa was playing poorly or let Kyrgios walk all over him. He hit 44 winners and only 18 unforced errors across the 4 games that they played. These are statistics that would probably take home a win in most matches. It's just that Nick Kyrgios hit a staggering 70 winners and 37 aces. In the 4th and final set, he didn't double fault a single time, and he aced on 1 out of every 4 of his serves. Clutch doesn't even begin to describe it. However, Nick Kyrgios did not convert this win into a career of consistent greatness. Immediately after, in the quarterfinals of Wimbledon, Nick Kyrgios would fall in 4 sets. And in the decade or so since this tournament, Kyrgios has consistently underachieved. His career peaked at a number 13 world ranking and a second place at Wimbledon in 2022. For most, this would be an incredible career resume, but for the talent that we know that Kyrgios possesses and the talent that we saw against Nadal, it is a disappointment. Kyrgios has become the poster child for the great underachiever. An athlete who dripped in talent, but didn't take his sport seriously enough to ascend to the top of it. As we've discussed, tennis is a sport that demands consistency. The great players are great because they do the hard things again and again. And we know Nick Kyrgios can do the hard things. He's beaten all three of the big three men's players, including Djokovic and Nadal, multiple times. And yet, he has also suffered many losses to players outside the top 100. Kyrgios has famously rejected regular practice schedules, and he finds tennis boring and easy. And to be fair to him, it does look easy for him. He's clearly incredibly gifted. But those giftings are not enough to remain at the top of the sport. He has consistently made headlines, but not really for the best reasons. He has been much maligned for verbally lashing out at his opponents and at umpires, for spitting, swearing, and smashing rackets so hard they flew into the stands. And these controversial headlines came sandwiched between highlights of Kyrgios hitting some of the greatest and most genius shots that the sport has ever seen. He's been labeled a brat and a disgrace to the sport.
The work, hands down. Every single time I play, he's doing some stupid shit.
And in the same breath, an enormously gifted athlete who has the potential to win Grand Slams, he just never has. Through it all, he's continued to feud with Rafael Nadal, with them meeting 8 more times and trading matches, with very little love lost between the two. Nadal, with his deep drive and reverence for tennis, is likely offended by Kyrgios. The gentleman's sport is a sport that demands the respect of its players, and instead, Kyrgios spends his time on the court lazily running around during points and yelling at the top of his lungs, almost in contempt that he even has to be there. He's given up on multiple matches mid-match, something that I bet Nadal has never even considered doing. This disrespect for the sport has caused Kyrgios' career to languish away as a constant threat, but never a real contender. Since that 2014 Wimbledon upset, Rafael Nadal went on to win 8 more Grand Slams and cement himself as one of tennis's greatest and hardest working players. Nick Kyrgios is a disappointing, polarizing, and fascinatingly talented figure. Upon his sudden entry into the tennis world, the legendary John McEnroe predicted, "I think we have found the next guy in the men's game." And while this hasn't turned out to be true, on this one day in 2014, the tennis world stood still and it welcomed Nick Kyrgios. It welcomed his swagger and his talent with open arms. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you enjoy this kind of sports story, you can check out some more on my channel that I've made. I especially think that you'll enjoy one I made about the basketball player Derrick Rose and the greatest scoring night of his career. You can also subscribe here on YouTube for more sports content. I'll see you in the next one.